Good morning and welcome to the Pinnacle Forum Series. My name is Jeremy Hopwood. I am the Chief Information Security Officer at Pinnacle Financial Partners. I will be your host today. We are setting up a cybersecurity forum here to talk about the landscape and the look at the current and future challenges that we've got out there. I'm excited to say a special welcome and good morning to all of our Pinnacle associates and our clients across the footprint, especially those that in the new locations that we've opened up: Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Georgia, Birmingham, Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, Kentucky, of course the existing footprint: Tennessee, Virginia, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina. Welcome. We're so glad you could join us. This is kind of a first of its kind. We're going to do a recorded live series here. We've got I've got the system up here to tell me when you guys send a question in. Just housekeeping kind of thing to set expectations. As you send questions, I may be able to work them into the conversation. If not, we'll get to them at the end. And if we don't, I've talked to the other panelists here. We want to let you know not to worry if we don't get to address your question today. We're happy to just talk to your FA, and we're happy to set up a follow-up call with any of you guys. I'm really excited about the group that we have here today. We wanted different perspectives, and we wanted different opinions and thoughts around the table. So I'm going to introduce you to our other panel members here. Jeremy Baker comes to us from Memphis. He's Assistant Special Agent in charge of the FBI, and we've worked together in the past and on a lot of these type of things. Andy Hines is another companion of mine here. He represents another Chief Information Security officer's viewpoint. He's with LifePoint Health and kind of represents the healthcare industry. I've got Michael Fleechek here from Kroll. He is the Associate Managing Director of Cyber Risk. And of course, if you don't know who Kroll is, they're the guys you call when there's an incident response, those kinds of things. And last but not least, Matthew White. He works for the Baker Donaldson Law Firm. He's a lawyer and the co-chair of the firm's Financial Services, Cybersecurity, and Data Privacy team. So we've got definitely different unique viewpoints around the table today. And so I want to kick it off and talk about the current landscape, what's going on in cybersecurity. And Michael, I guess I'll start with you. For as long as I can remember, the top threat actors and the top bad guys that are out there that have been attacking both U.S. businesses and U.S. infrastructure has traditionally been our adversaries, the known adversaries, right? China, Russia, North Korea. Has that changed? Is that still the case? Are these still our top threat actors? What are you seeing on an incident response perspective?
Yeah, so great question. So, a lot of what Kroll sees typically is, again, a lot of it's coming from APAC countries. We do have, and we're seeing different types of threats. And what Kroll typically sees is these threats are kind of in three categories. You have your APTs, or advanced persistent threats. You have your organized crime groups, and then we also have the lone wolf groups. And a lot of those are kind of originating from the APAC region. That doesn't mean that we're not seeing, U.S. stateside kind of actor groups, but a lot of it does still continue to come from the APAC region.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. There's really three branches, right? There's you call them APTs, advanced persistent threat, which are more of the nation state. These are the guys, they're the professionals that you think.
Correct.
But I want to talk, because we see a lot of volume coming from the second part of that, which is the lone wolf and the organized crime. And Jeremy, from a law enforcement perspective, organized crime, I tend to think business email compromise. I tend to think a lot of the phishing links that we're seeing, and monetization, ransomware. Mm-hmm. Is that where you're seeing coming out of the organized crime side of the house?
Absolutely. Transnational criminal organized crime groups, we see those perpetuating business email compromise schemes, ransomware. Some of these are so highly sophisticated and well run, they seem like legitimate businesses. So, for example, some of our victims will wake up, log on, the screen is locked, all the files are encrypted. It'll have like a 1-800 number. And so if you didn't know any better, you would think you were calling Dell to get customer support, but they're there to help you with a virtual wallet, to get a Bitcoin transaction, to unlock your files, and those sorts of things. Definitely agree with Michael. A few other places we see too, we do see some of the criminal groups emanate out of West Africa and also Eurasia still. We see quite a bit of activity from there.
And I've we were talking about this earlier, but I've seen this, that I've actually had some of our clients that have experienced this. They've told us that there's call centers. Like you call, they put you on hold. They're very friendly. At the same time, what they're trying to do is extort you for money, right? That's the whole goal.
Exactly.
Is to extort you to get you to pay this ransomware payment. Andy, are you guys seeing that on the healthcare side? I mean, you guys, one of the reasons why I asked you to be here is, aside from financial, you're one of the other most attacked industries, right? Healthcare is a big target. Is that what you guys are seeing as well?
I would say from the healthcare industry standpoint, there's definitely been an increased focus as a target, mainly because it's critical infrastructure. People are there to be taken care of, and from a vulnerability standpoint, to be able to be attacked and impact care, and then really try to get financial gain. So yes, 2022 has been a really tough year for the healthcare industry in general. Specifically defending these attacks. So a lot of, I will say, time and investments have been put in place to continue to mature the infrastructure for a lot of healthcare companies.
Yeah. Let's pivot to the types of attacks, right? Let's talk about, so the folks that are watching in today and the people that will be watching this recording later are going to be people who work for a small, mid-sized business, or maybe even a large enterprise business, and they're looking to us to talk about and gain some knowledge on what are the most common types of attacks, and what are you guys seeing? And I'll tell you, I read the most recent Verizon breach report, and there was some I wrote these down because there's some very startling facts in there. It says more than 50% of all small to mid-sized businesses have already experienced an attack. And the attacks are targeted, 70% of all attacks are targeted at small to mid-sized business. And there's this one fact that I saw that I thought was very alarming. It says those companies that have experienced attack, as many as 60% of them go out of business within 6 months, right? So, Matt, why do you think this is? Why are they targeting these small, mid-sized businesses? Why is all of the volume seem to be going towards the small, mid-sized business? You would think they're looking for the big guys. Why is it that they're going for that?
Well, I think that what we're seeing is some of these businesses, say with 100 employees or less, really just don't have the same amount of resources that they can dedicate to cybersecurity preparedness. They often don't have the expertise, that some of the larger companies have in terms of both IT personnel, but also sort of how to implement those things, or even how to train effectively on cybersecurity prevention measures. And so I think they are more likely, or it's easier to get into some of their systems.
Sure.
On the flip side, I think what we are seeing is that just with the proliferation of data over the past, decade or so, more and more of these small to mid-sized companies also have large amounts of data, and so they're able to get kind of the same bang for the buck and get into these systems a whole lot easier. The other piece that I think has a big effect, and you had asked earlier, what are some of the most common types of attacks? I think still, ransomware is obviously in the headlines and a big deal, but I think still the most common type of attack is a business email compromise. When you have some of these smaller companies or mid-sized companies, very often you have certain executives at the company that have widespread access throughout the entire network. And so whether it's that executive or an executive assistant for them, or an office manager that can get into their emails, you can isolate one target and then get broad access through their entire networks. And so again, it's another easy entry point for some of these threat actors.
Yeah, and it's a good point. The same Verizon breach report says more than 90% of all attacks continue to come through email, right? Michael, email continues to, we call that an attack vector, right?
Correct.
And back when I was growing up and getting early on in the industry, it was more about the firewall, and everybody focused on, and small business guys were worried about, I'm going to go buy a firewall. But that's, I think it kind of changed. That used to be the way. They used to try to get into your company and come through the firewall, but the Verizon breach report says 90% are coming through email. Why is that?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge and why that is it's the human aspect. I think that our end users and people in general, that's the weakest link. A lot of companies do a really good job today on putting perimeter defenses in places, your firewalls, your VPNs, but the kind of the low-hanging fruit to the threat actor and the easiest path into your network is exploiting the end user.
Right.
Send them a phishing email with a link redirect them to a site, give out credentials, potentially, include a malicious document in that email and have it execute internally. That is still one of the easiest methods, and that's why they choose to target it.
Yeah, I tell our folks at Pinnacle a lot, anybody can pretend to be anybody on the internet, right?
Yes.
We were talking about this earlier, registering a domain that's just one character off, right? That's very similar, or just, again, compromising one person's email, and it looks like a legitimate email, right? I want to go back, we were talking about why the small businesses. One of the things that has, a topic that's risen, and Jeremy, you can probably speak to this, is supply chain attacks, right? We've seen that these companies, like a Pinnacle, like a LifePoint, we're spending millions upon millions of dollars in investment of high-tech, very sophisticated, mechanisms, right? That is not available sometimes, or the budgets are not available to some of the small, mid-sized business. So therefore, the bad guys have figured out, I could spend all day trying to get into one of these bigger companies, but why don't I go break into a supply chain? Can you speak to that? What does that mean? When we say a supply chain attack, what does that mean? Why do they go after a small business to try to get to a Pinnacle, let's say?
And before I go there, I just want to echo with Matt, not only small businesses, but for the same reason we believe the attackers go after municipalities, police departments. You might have some small police department and it's a lieutenant who's running patrol, but then also is their IT guy. And they're not thinking about InfoSec and IT as being different. They're thinking about that as being, you just take care of the computers and the servers. We'll see town administrators wearing multiple hats. Hey, you make sure everything is secure as well, in addition to cutting paychecks and keeping the lights on. So it seems to be that same thought process, is rather than going after the Fortune 100 company that has a $200 million cybersecurity budget, they're going after the low-hanging fruit, much like emails. Supply chain definitely would be sort of the same thing. If I'm a bad guy, if I can put malicious code in something that you're then going to plug into your network, it's already there. Unfortunately, we've seen even large companies be duped with SolarWinds. So even the federal government, there were some agencies. So we tend to think of this as a new phenomenon, but there's some great white papers that were written 10, 15 years ago warning about supply chain threats. And unfortunately, now it's kind of becoming a mainstream conversation. So, but you're exactly right. A large company might have the capital to be able to invest in making sure that that procurement process is secure, and a small company may just be buying things off the shelf, not from a real reputable vendor, and then you're putting your networks at risk if you do that.
Right. And some of the smaller, the CEOs and the folks that represent some of the smaller organizations out there might not recognize that that's why they are a hard target, right? Is that the bad guys recognize, and they do all this diligence, and they figure out, LifePoint, for example, who's doing their HVAC work or who's doing their, and they try to compromise them because and I'm not going to mention the name, but there was a large company, a large retailer, that's exactly how they got compromised several years ago. It was their HVAC vendor that was compromised and brought this, brought this threat right in to the retailer, right? So it's very much a clear and present danger. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. And I know everybody's got a different opinion on this. And Matt, I might start with you here just to start to kind of frame up ransomware, right? So ransomware is when we walk in the morning, like Jeremy said, and our screens are kind of blank. Tell me, you get some calls sometimes from people that are experiencing ransomware, right? Tell us what that really is. Tell us what we're talking about here. What's happening in the background on ransomware?
Yeah, so I mean, at a high level, you're going to walk into a ransomware attack. Your systems are going to be locked down. You're going to be unable to access, the data on your networks or your networks themselves. And either contemporaneously or upon looking into it, you'll find a ransom demand that'll say, pay us X amount of money, and in exchange, we'll give you what's called a decryption key, which is the code for them to get rid of the ransomware, unlock your system. And typically there'll be a monetary demand alongside that that asked to be paid. It's often asked to be paid in cryptocurrency. Bitcoin has been kind of the predominant one in this space. There's a variety of considerations around how to pay if you're going to. For example, you'd have to have what's called a crypto wallet or digital wallet, and you would transfer cryptocurrency to the digital wallet of the threat actor. And then there's a whole host of considerations around, should you pay the ransom or not, which is something I'm sure we're going to talk about here probably at length.
Yeah, and I do want to ask that question because I know we have some very different opinions on that. But Michael, crypto wallets, cryptocurrency, crypto exchange, the average guy, right? I'm in the industry. I don't have a crypto wallet, right? The average guy doesn't have a crypto wallet, right? They don't understand what that means. And I think I walk in one day and my servers are all encrypted and I've got a screen that says call this number. From a business perspective, my goal is to get my business back online. Is not having a crypto wallet going to slow that down? I mean, what is the alternative? Let's say I don't have a crypto wallet. Do I call guys, if I call Kroll or if I call Baker Donaldson, do you guys have those things set up? What does that look like? Help us walk through what that really means, crypto wallet and paying these guys in cryptocurrency.
Yeah, so great question. So, crypto wallet is just, it's an online wallet, or kind of think of it as an online bank in a way. It's just where you put your money. It's quick digital access to the currency. So usually you have, if you're receiving the money, you have an assigned, like a long coded key that's your wallet identification, I guess is the best way to say it. So, if you walk in and you've got that and you're like, oh gosh, what do I need to do? Again, one of the preferred methods definitely is reach out to, somebody like Kroll or somebody or a partner who can help you walk through that. Because it's definitely something that is, if it's new to you, it's definitely going to be challenging. But yeah, so looking at that message on your screen, you may want to, it really does depend. If you're just trying to get it back, doing kind of the research to figure out what's the best avenue to go. But I think the better method would be to reach out to a partner, engage some help, have those conversations quickly to find out what your best options are.
Because we never pay them in US dollars. We never pay them in cash. We're not doing an ACH or a wire. It's always cryptocurrency, which we think Bitcoin, we think those types of things.
Right.
That's what you guys are tracking on law enforcement, right?
I'm certainly not aware of a time where they've asked us to pay in US dollars or any of the victims. So I do want to say the FBI's stance is we recommend do not pay ever. And there's a few different reasons for that. Number one, you're dealing with criminals. Can you trust them?
Right.
So we've seen in cases time and time again, the bad guys will come back 2-3 times. They'll just up the amount. Also, right now, what we're seeing is double ransomware or even triple ransomware. So before they encrypt your system, they're exfiltrating data. And so they're going to basically extort you with both things. Hey, we might lock you up, but we also have this over here, and we'll sell it and embarrass you, and you'll have a breach on your hands, a leak. And the third way, the triple part of it, is they'll actually go to the people whose data you stole. So let's say it's a bank. They might find a high net worth customer and say, did you know that your bank has been irresponsible with your data, or your PII, just for example. So I'm sure we'll get into different ways to protect, but if you are protected, if you have good backups, if you have good cyber hygiene, again, another reason why we would say don't pay, because going back to the organized crime group, you're really just lining their pockets as well. Right. And then there's even some liability aspects. The Office of Foreign Asset Control, there are some considerations there. There's some liability. If organizations were to pay these groups and they happen to be on some of those sanctions lists, that could be problematic.
That's a pivot from a legal, and we're talking about whether we would pay or would not pay, and I'm going to ask Andy a question here in a second on, because there's a business reason why we might want to pay, right? I definitely subscribe. I think we've talked here, all of us subscribe. You're just fueling the problem, right? We're just funding somebody else to get compromised, somebody else to have to deal with this, but we don't get to always make those decisions, right? Businesses do. But before we go there, I want to hit, you hit a very big topic, OFAC nation. So this is Office of Foreign Asset Control, right? So the U.S. government says we're not really allowed to give money to our enemies, right? That's what OFAC means. And especially if you're in a healthcare or financial institution, we're not allowed to send money to those organizations. Matt, from a legal perspective, and I know that every business out there is not held to this, but when you're working with your clients, and I know you do this, you're also kind of on the incident response. And I didn't mean to set this up. I got incident response on this side. You guys talk to folks. Explain what OFAC and the problems that we have in navigating OFAC.
Sure. So the way it works is that OFAC maintains various sanctions lists, and then there's a consolidated sanction list that aggregates it all together. And on those lists are various individuals, entities, groups like known hacker groups, and some countries or governments are on those lists as well. And it is generally prohibited to make payments to anyone that's on those lists. That's sort of a derivation of the general proposition that for the vast majority of folks, as long as you're not paying someone on that list and you're not certain government entities, paying a ransom is not illegal, right? It's legal to do so as long as you are not one of those government entities and you're not paying someone on one of these lists. And so the way that you navigate that is by typically, if you are inclined to pay a ransom, you will do, and Michael's point's right on, you typically need to have a third party help you with this. And I don't want to get too far off topic, but those third parties that help you with this, they also do maintain crypto wallets. So I don't want to leave everyone on this call with the impression that you need to run out, open a crypto wallet in case you have a ransomware attack. I mean, you'll pay the company in US dollars, they'll convert it to cryptocurrency, and they'll facilitate the exchange. One of the services those companies all now provide is they will also run what's called a sanctions check, and they will run the information you have against the sanctions list to determine whether or not you're paying or attempting to pay someone on one of the lists. It gets a little more complicated because very often you don't know the entity that you're paying. You may not know the threat actor group that's made a ransom demand. You may not have any other details other than the crypto wallet address. And so oftentimes all you can run through the sanctions check is the crypto wallet address. And very often those come back clean because they'll create a new crypto wallet for each of these transactions. And so the sanctions check certainly is something that needs to be done before anyone considers paying a ransom, because otherwise you're just not doing that due diligence. Unfortunately, payment to one of these sanctioned individuals or entities, it's a strict liability standard. So if you've paid someone on the list, knowingly or not, you can face liability. And so OFAC has put out some guidance in 2020 and 2021 on mitigating factors to, if you do end up paying someone despite doing a sanctions check, these are things that can minimize your liability or prevent liability. And those are things like having appropriate security safeguards in place beforehand. And one of the most important ones is cooperation with law enforcement, both during a ransomware attack and afterwards. And that entails, one, notifying them of the ransom demand, discussing, strategies around payment. The position from the government is always don't pay, but the other piece to that is providing the technical details to the government so that they can factor that into their investigation as well.
And there was no mistake on the why I put this here, because what I want to make sure that everyone has a takeaway here is that it's a very complex problem, right? And so there's always a legal aspect, and you need legal counsel, and every law firm that does this for a living that operates inside the cyber has crypto wallets, has that ability. Same with incident response partners, right? And of course we know law enforcement. But Andy, I want to pivot to you because in the last 18 months, this has kind of come up in different circles, especially in the Chief Information Security Officer circles, is that sometimes you have the ability to not pay. You have a backup. Your IT guy says we can recover, but your CEO or your board of directors says we don't want to pay because there's this aspect, and I'd like to get your take on it, is that there are other business factors, right? There was a firm out in California got hit, and it took them over a week to recover. So they did have backups, but they were down for a full week. And then now you're talking about lost revenue potential. So can you speak to why? I mean, I'm not saying that LifePoint takes this position, but why would a business consider not restoring, even if they have the capability, and paying the ransom?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say it really ties back to how your company does risk analysis and evaluating the pros and cons of such a decision, whether insurance is involved, whether there's been guidance given through counsel, as well as the FBI or Secret Service or whomever. But depending on, in some business situations, if you don't pay it, maybe the company might go completely out of business. From a healthcare standpoint, all healthcare locations typically have what they call downtime procedures, where you're still able to provide care and provide services. But at some point, you start looking at, it's like, well, how long can I maintain provide the quality of care that you need to be providing without diverting patients and continuing business. So, those are all things to be considered. But, specifically in healthcare, like typically the stance is we're not paying, but everything needs to be in consideration in a business scenario, and thinking how long will business disruption be, whether you do have backups, whether you have alternate services that can be provided. So there's definitely a whole new focus on business resiliency, specifically to cyber, everything down from departments and how those backups and processes would occur, as well as even really just evaluating your overall revenue in specific areas and finding what your biggest area of opportunities are to be able to address those risks, as well as hopefully remediate any future challenges you might have.
Right.
And one of the things Jeremy said, I think, really factors into this consideration too, and that's these double and triple extortion attacks, right? I mean, the existence of backups, the ability to relatively quickly restore backups really can help from the continued operations standpoint. But then if you're having a double extortion attack, or you're having an attack where they've claimed to have stolen your data, right? That's another reason you may want to pay to prevent, or at least try to prevent, the further dissemination of that data or the sale of that data on the dark web, or to prevent them calling your customers in a triple extortion attack. Right. And I'm sure Michael can speak to this, but I mean, in my experience, I think those double extortion attacks at least have become the standard. I mean, almost every time we're seeing ransomware, we're also seeing the.
And when you say double extortion, I want to talk through this, and I know you specifically have walked with some people through this. Mm-hmm. When you say double extortion, you really mean two payments, right? So that means there's always a, hey, we've encrypted your data. If you'll pay us this money, we will give you your data back. And I've talked to some people that have gone through it, and they pay the money, and only part of their network was unlocked. Can you talk about that, and then talk about the progression of how we get to a triple extortion, or Jeremy mentioned the data exfiltration portion, right? There used to be they just came in and encrypted it. Now, when you say data exfiltration, that means not only did they get a virus or a malware onto my network, they actually stole some data. The exfiltrate means they got it off my network and took possession of it, right? So. Right. Can you explain that a little bit more? When somebody calls you and they're walking through, or you've got some of your negotiators on the line, that initial request for payment and then the subsequent.
Yeah, so first and foremost, just to kind of mention, backing up to one of your other questions, should a client pay or not? From Kroll's perspective, we try to remain neutral on that. We basically try to allow the client to make that decision for themselves.
Sure.
We also just try to give them, educate them, and present the options that they have. As far as encryption, again, why sometimes if they pay to get the encryption keys, sometimes the data, some of it's not unlocked. Sometimes the threat actor's code is just, it's not very well written, or it's got bugs in it. So the encryption occurs, but it kind of ruins that documentation or that data, and so the encryption key they provide may not be valid. One of the third options that we kind of see is, besides the extortion on the data, and then also exfilling the data, kind of the triple threat, I think, is a lot of threat actors will put up public shaming sites. So they'll give you X amount of days to either make the payment. Hey, we'll give you 10 days, and if you don't pay this in 10 days, we're going to post on our public shaming site and let everyone know that you've been hacked and you have a data breach on your hands. Right. So that third option we see quite often.
And inside that data breach, and this is a question that we got on the screen here from our audience, they ask about, I think Jeremy mentioned PII, right? And as companies, we have responsibilities, right? We have, if you take credit cards, you've got a PCI compliance responsibility. If you house personal data, then you have a responsibility, PII, right? Personally identifiable information, that's what PII is. And so you might not know or understand that your company has PII, right? And so PII, as I understand it, and you guys are the experts, can help me out here, is anything that is not already publicly known, right? So if I take somebody's date of birth, for example, that's a personally identifiable information. Is that right? I mean, Matt,
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, that's right. It can be very industry specific, right? I mean, the financial industry has the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which has definitions of what NPI is, non-public personal information is for financial services companies. Healthcare has HIPAA, and they have, it's a wide variety of data that falls under protected HIPAA information. When it comes to entities that are not regulated in the financial services or healthcare, the analysis, again, can be complicated because there are 50 state data breach laws. Every state has one, and every state has a definition of what is personal information under that data breach law.
And those are called privacy laws, or each state has their own privacy law and how they interpret what privacy is.
So these are the laws that will tell you if you have data, right, and that data has gone out to a third party, right, is that transmission of data a breach? And then is that covered data under the law? And there are commonalities, right? Things like usernames and passwords, names with social security numbers, dates of birth, those types of things in combination usually are personal information. But a lot of times they're things much more broadly than the typical thing everyone thinks is if it's my social security number, my credit card number. I mean, those both can be personal information for sure, but in all 50 states, it is more broad than that.
Sure. And one thing that I want to touch on, there are two pieces of this, and I'm going to ask you because I know you have the answer to this, and we didn't talk about this prior, but I do know that Kroll does this. People believe that just because they get ransomware, they have to pay. That's their only option. They either have a backup or they have to pay. And that's absolutely not true. Today, a lot of the incident response partners, such as Kroll, have the actual keys to some of the known ransomware that's out there, right? There are keys available that you don't necessarily, I guess my point is, you don't necessarily always have to pay. If you contact an incident response partner, they may already have another path for you to unencrypt that data. Is that true?
Yeah, possibly. It's always worth reaching out to a partner to see what they have available and how they can help you. Whether it's, they may have some tool set that can help you kind of unencrypt that data. And it may be just, educating them and giving them that other option to not have to pay.
And I would add, one of the services in my experience that's extremely helpful from Kroll and others in your space, even if you don't have the keys, they typically do maintain intelligence on who some of these ransomware groups are. And so they can give you information around, here's what their tendencies are, here's how long they may take to negotiate with you, here's how willing they might be to negotiate down off a ransom. That sort of intelligence, I think, is incredibly helpful.
Jeremy, I would add law enforcement as well. So the way the FBI is divided is that there'll be a certain field office somewhere around the country that will have a lead on one of these ransomware groups.
Absolutely.
And so if a firm in Memphis, unfortunately, were to be victimized, we would respond. We'll deal with our headquarters, our cyber division. We'll find out, it's this, we believe it's this variant. They'll say, okay, Seattle's got the ticket on that, and then Seattle may actually have those decryption keys as well. So there's really no reason to never reach out to law enforcement. You might as well, you have nothing to lose.
I agree, and you said something earlier I thought was interesting, and I want the audience to hear this. The last thing we think of sometimes when we're in the middle of a ransomware or a computer incident, the last thing we really think about is law enforcement, because we don't really think there's anything can be done against these criminals that are overseas and things like that. But hopefully what the audience hears today is that this is a bigger thing than what they might think it is. They need legal counsel, they need an incident response partner, but from a law enforcement, one of the things you said earlier when we were sitting here discussing it, I didn't even know about personally, was that you guys have resources available to business owners that, for example, I'm going to let you explain it in your words, but I'm going to paraphrase what I heard. You have almost like profilers that have profiled these organizations, and you know how they work, and you know what they've done in the past, and maybe a workaround. Is that accurate?
Right, absolutely. So we have our behavioral analysis unit, which really is the profilers, kind of like you see on TV. Everybody thinks of those folks as always helping in maybe serial killer cases or counterterrorism cases, but we actually have a unit devoted to cyber. And the reason being is that, as we've all talked about, these are humans. They're behind the keyboard. They have different tics. They have different idiosyncrasies. They have different marching orders from the nation state that controls them, or just a certain way they do it because that's the way their hacking group does it. So that can really help, especially if maybe the group's not known right away. We could help people work with behavioral analysis unit, and in a lot of instances that has helped as we work with third-party providers, or as we just continue with our other law enforcement agencies. He mentioned Secret Service. We also work a lot with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, both proactively and if there were an attack. And bringing all those government services together with private sector, we've had a lot of success in doing that.
Andy, there was a question came across from the Atlanta market, and the question was, if I have an offsite backup, if I have a backup in the cloud, a nightly backup in the cloud, am I immune? I can guarantee I don't have to pay a ransom just because I've got a backup in the cloud. Is that true, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so from a configuration standpoint, that backup is still accessible, so the bad actor could technically still get in there unless it's a immutable backup or capabilities that cannot be either deleted or vice versa. So it's really important to think through your backup strategy, whether it's something called air gapping, where basically you cannot manipulate and so forth, those type of those backups if you're online. So really almost think of a separation of the capability of really logging into those backups and be able to perform any type of operation.
Absolutely. And if you're taking notes out there, the question you want to ask your partner is, we talked about, is immutable. That means it can't be written to, and air-gapped is it's on a separate network.
That's right.
Let's talk about a mutable for just a second. I've heard of a couple people that, Michael, that they experienced a ransomware attack in the middle of writing their backup.
Yeah, so Kroll has seen, unfortunately, a lot of cases where the threat actors, once they gain access to the network, they kind of like with email, they'll send an email and kind of do reconnaissance. They'll do the same thing on your network. They're trying to figure out the systems and what they're connecting to. A lot of times they're looking for specifically your backup systems. And the first thing that they want to target, they want to find those backup systems and either encrypt them or delete the data so you have no recourse to restore.
Right.
And I would just add on the backup point, from my perspective, and again, I'm not on the technical side like some of y'all are, but one of the things that stumbles up quite a few folks in my experience has been, not if you have backups, but how quickly can you restore from those backups, and have you tested that to know what that period of time is? I mean, there's something to be said for having, great backups that are unencrypted, and you know that they're available to restore from. But if it's going to take 30 days to restore those backups, that may make a significant difference in your decisions around what you're going to do.
Yeah. We'll answer this one question, and then I want to pivot the conversation. A question came in, said, how many hackers actually get caught, and what happens to the hackers? And so maybe you can talk, Jeremy, about the extradition and where,
Sure.
because these are coming from countries that we don't necessarily have any kind of relationship.
Right.
Russia's certainly not going to give us their top hackers, right?
There are some challenges for sure, but we have a very long memory and we have a very long reach. So we can extradite. In fact, I sit in the Western District of Tennessee, and we're the first district in the United States to successfully extradite a cyber criminal from Ghana, from the country of Ghana. So as I mentioned, we've seen some West African groups. There are some countries that it's going to be pretty tough, but guess what? People like to travel.
Absolutely.
People like to go to Disney World. They like to go to Las Vegas. So through our partnerships, we have a whole network of legal attachés around the world in about 80 or 90 cities internationally. And so even if they're not sitting in the exact city where the bad guys are, they cover that territory, and they're working with those international partners. So through Department of Justice and just the whole legal apparatus, there's a lot of things we can do. It's actually one of the fun parts of the job.
Absolutely.
There definitely is the thought process of, some will say, well, why waste your time? Those bad guys are in X country. But the other side, which I think a lot of us find exciting, is why not? Do the case, get them prosecuted, put a red notice out there with Interpol, and let's see what happens.
And we are getting some traction. I mean, we just saw we saw some of the Conti group was recently, right, and that's a Russian organization.
That's exactly right.
Was arrested and prosecuted. So I mean, there's hope. Look, this problem is not going away. It's projected to be I wrote the number down here so I get $10.5 trillion cost, right, to the world. $10.5 trillion cost to the world by 2025. So I always say when I'm giving these things, we know why we break into Fort Knox. We know what the motive is. We know why they keep doing it, right? This is all about money, and $10.5 trillion is a lot of reason. Let's pivot the conversation to the folks that are watching. What can we do, right? What are some ways that we can avoid having to get ourselves in a position to pay ransom? And I'm going to reserve the last question that I'll ask today is, if you could give one piece of advice. So be thinking on that. But the first question I've got is, Andy, let me set this up. You've got an uncle owns a business, and he happens to see this online, or he's talking to you at Christmas, and he says, "Hey, what can I do to avoid getting hit with ransomware?"
Yeah, that's a great question. I think depending on how technical my uncle is and if he's going to secure my services of my personal time and to help him, I think that there's a lot of different avenues for that. The first piece is there's a lot of simple things that can be done from a technology standpoint, but you think about security is not a one-time thing. This is something you should be thinking through operationally because bad guys continue to get better. And you might learn something today from a security standpoint to be able to block, so it's a little bit of whack-a-mole, but there's always going to be something that comes up tomorrow. And unfortunately, in my role, it's great you did something today, but it's really hard to pitch a perfect game every single day. And no one can do it in baseball, and it's the same thing in security. So the big piece I'm fortunate to have is great staff, great team members, great partners that can help me and really allow our company to be protected. So I would say, depending on the size of the company, I would definitely look at a partnership with either a security provider, a company that you trust to work with, because that's really going to be a piece that you're going to have day in, day out, having those relationships to be able to respond.
You said something that I think is critical, and so I want to go back and touch on it because I think it's something that small business owners need to hear. It is a conscious effort, and this is not a one-time defense. Again, we talked about once upon a time, I talked to these business owners, I bought a firewall, right? This is literally, think football for a second. You've got an offense and a defense, right? Yeah. And so you're always realigning. There's not one play. You're not setting up for one play. You're setting up for every play because it's a constant, everyday thing, right? And so one of the things that, for example, that they recommend that, at least in the financial sector, they recommend that you spend at least 10% of your overall IT budget should be dedicated to cybersecurity. And it's a pausing moment for business owners that are watching in today to think, how much am I investing in? There's that old saying, you're going to pay one way or another. I would prefer to pay proactively. I'd prefer to plan. I'd prefer to have an option rather than just reacting, right? I want to ask a question here of you guys, because it's that whole, when I get myself into that position, well, I've got cyber insurance, right? I don't worry about that because I've got cyber insurance. Yet I've talked to some folks lately that didn't understand that the cyber insurance they had was a cyber liability insurance, right? And it did not cover the cost of the ransom, and it did not cover the cost of their incident response partner. So I'll flip it to you here, Michael, for a second. When you guys talk about incident response, is there what advice could we give the business owners out there on maybe checking on their insurance policy? Is this something you're seeing on a regular basis where people are just they don't have what they think they have?
Yeah, so great question. Yeah, so obviously with your cyber carrier insurance policy for cyber, you really kind of want to have an understanding of what does it include. So let's say I have an incident and I have to bring in an incident response team. Well, they're going to do the analysis. Is that covered? You may need to bring in, or you may want to bring in outside breach counsel, or what's called a breach coach. Is that covered with my insurance? Right. We know if your incident response team has shown, you did have data that was exposed or taken, now you have potentially notification obligations, and you may have to go to e-discovery to look at that data to determine is there sensitive information that has PII or PHI, and then based on state law, there may be notification obligations that are specific to each state. All those costs start to kind of balloon, and you want to make sure that your policies have coverage for those.
And that goes back to what we said earlier. 70% of these companies that have been hit with ransomware go out of business within 6 months. And I tend to believe it's because they didn't plan and prepare. And you guys do this a lot over at Baker Donelson with what your firm does. Matt is on what we would call incident response planning, incident response preparation. Are you seeing people that didn't realize they got to the point and they needed a ransom, they realize my insurance doesn't pay for the ransom? And they're asking for millions of dollars typically in ransom, right? We were talking about this earlier. It's no matter what you negotiate it down to, if you've got a good partner, they're asking for millions up front, only to find out later that the policy I have doesn't cover that.
Yeah, we see that all the time. And I would add that over the last 12 to 18 months, there's been dramatic changes in the cyber insurance space. And so there are many providers that have gone out of the market and aren't writing coverage anymore. Those that are writing coverage are one, increasing costs for less, and so kind of the standard we're seeing now is double the cost for half the coverage. And I think a function of that has been, one, to even get cyber coverage now, you're having to have more technical capabilities put in place, and you're really, frankly, just being asked to really assess your cybersecurity preparedness a lot more than you would have been, even 2 years ago.
And what you mean by that is the carrier, let's call it Chubb Insurance or one of the big insurance companies out there, is saying, I will not give you cyber insurance unless you meet the following requirements.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that you would, write a check and you could get cyber insurance, and what that policy looked like does differ quite a bit. Now, when you go to get that insurance or to renew insurance you had before, you're often presented with like an 18-page questionnaire where you have to fill out detailed information about what information you have, how you protect that information. Do you have an incident response plan? Have you planned for an attack and what you're going to do in response? Have you tested that plan through things like tabletop exercises? What sort of employee training do you do? You have to answer all of these questions even to get the insurance. But then I think one of the points you made earlier, Jeremy, is absolutely right. Cyber insurance policies are not uniform. And so every policy you're going to read, every policy you're going to get, they're going to be different. And different things are going to be covered, different things are going to be excluded, different things are going to be subject to sublimits. And so it really is important for you, or if you use a broker, to have your broker help you understand the coverages you have, and then make sure you're getting coverage that's tailored to your business needs.
Right. Let's end. We've got just a little bit of minutes left here on the clock. Let's end with, I said this earlier, and I've given you some time to think about it. If you get to say one thing, and I know there's no magic bullet, there's not one right answer, but I do like the fact that we've got unique perspective here on the panel. If you could say one thing that you would do, one thing that you would recommend to business owners, to individuals out there, what's one thing that I could do in the coming year, 2023, to protect myself, my family, my business? You see a lot of these things. What's the one thing? If you get one answer, what is that, Michael?
Yeah, so the one thing that I would make a suggestion is for whatever your accounts that you have or your systems, enable multi-factor authentication, or what's called two-factor authentication, on everything that you possibly can. I can't tell you how many times we get cases or matters that come in, and if they would have just simply had some sort of a barrier in front of the threat actor, such as MFA, it may have completely stopped this, or at least delayed it long enough to give you kind of notice that you've got something odd going on. But on top of that, not only enabling multi-factor where you can, it's really important to understand what multi-factor is, how does it work, and the verification options that your platform gives you. Example, Microsoft 365 gives you 4 options for MFA options. Call to phone method, where you get a phone call and you hit the pound symbol to approve it. You get a PIN texted to your cell phone, a PIN retrieved from an authenticator application, or what's called a push notification, where you get a pop-up on your phone that says allow or deny. Knowing how those work are really important as well. Example, 2 methods that I mentioned Kroll recommends not using. Don't enable the phone call method, and don't enable the push notification where you can just simply click allow or deny. We've seen too many times where the end users, again, kind of being the low-hanging fruit here of opportunity for these threat actor groups, don't really understand what they're being presented, and they just unknowingly allow it or click approve, and now they've let the threat actor walk right in. So again, knowing how MFA works, I think, is really important. But my one hope would be to put that on everything you possibly can.
And it's funny because this is kind of like second nature for us, right? But it's true. There's almost every time I'm dealing with someone that has had a compromise, they did not have multi-factor, even on their email. Even on their free, you can get multi-factor on free mail. And to Matt's point, if you're trying to get an insurance coverage, a lot of these carriers will not write you unless you prove to them that you have MFA enabled in your business, multi-factor.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, there are some of these MFA solutions that you either likely already have the options to enable or can get, for free or extremely inexpensively. This is not the $100 million purchase to be able to get an MFA on most devices.
Yeah, I agree. Andy, I'll flip it to you. What is your one thing, if you could pick one thing?
Well, I totally agree with where you're going from a technology standpoint. And I think there are tons of layers of defenses that exist from a cybersecurity standpoint, and there's really hard to really find a silver bullet, but it can be super overwhelming. And I say that because from all the layers that that there are in security, you're looking to really provide the biggest impact for the dollar, the time, and so forth. And if it's a small staff, they might not understand how to actually implement something like that correctly. So, like I said before, I think having either have dedicated staff that's going to focus on this can really make your maturity of the problem reduce your risk, or partnering with a outside firm to help you really build this internally from a security standpoint. So there's a lot of firms that provide tools, monitoring, detection capabilities, so that way you have a heads up if something is going on in your network that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andy. A lot of times we feel like we get a false sense of hope because I've got an IT guy. I've got an IT guy in my company, and he sets up our servers, and he can handle that, right? Yep. And I think your point is very valid. It's clear today we're talking about a very complex, and there's not one of us are experts in all things, right? We all represent a piece of that. So having a partner, especially for cybersecurity, even if it's nothing more than to audit the things that you believe are in place. It's in the military we say trust and verify, and in the cybersecurity world we say trust and verify. Law enforcement, right? So you want to trust that your IT guy, but let's just verify and make sure it's in place.
Yeah, added assurance is something we constantly are doing to evaluate even our own internal controls to make sure that they're actually effective.
Absolutely. Jeremy, from your perspective, I know you tend to be on the very end of this thing. You only see bad things. They call you a lot when something bad has happened. Yeah. So I value your opinion a lot. You and I have done these kinds of talks before.
Right.
What is from your perspective, what's the one thing they could do from a law enforcement perspective?
Yeah, the technical controls are crucial, and if you look at the variety of frameworks, whether that be NIST or ISACA or ISO, that's what they're talking about, and that's why there's so much just constant development and updating of all of those frameworks. But to supplement that, I would really recommend, if organizations don't always have like a phishing awareness campaign, they're very simple. They can do it for very minimal. There's even actually free sites you could go to. But the belief is now about 1 in 5 organizations do this. And there's been some studies that organizations that do it regularly and have done it really well for a consistent period of time have gotten that click rate down to somewhere like 3 to 7% if they're doing it really, really well. Now, unfortunately, 1 click is one too many, because that could be the one that leads to malware being deposited. But at the same time, I'd much rather see 2.9% than 50% or 20%. Right. And so that's something that is really a positive development. And it really does educate users. Michael hit it many times. It's really that endpoint. It's that human factor. And it's an easy way to go to where the bad guys are going. The best and strongest defense is informed by offense. So we know that the bad guys on offense, they're going to people still through emails. So it's an easy win to try to just educate and try to prevent that.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of facts. If you just go out there and look, there's a lot of facts that support training in general. Mm-hmm. If you have limited budget, right, you certainly want to put the technology pieces in place. Mm-hmm. But you definitely want to focus on, if you can, again, lower the overall chances that somebody's going to do something like that. It's absolutely good. Matt, if I flip to you, what is your one thing that you would recommend that these guys do?
Yeah. So, and first, I agree with everything that everyone said. I mean, both the technical side, the partnering with a third party that can come in and help, and certainly training, especially where we tell our clients, employees are your biggest weakness, and the best way to beef that up is technical controls and training. But from my perspective, I think what I would add to the mix there would be to have a thoughtful incident response plan. And what we counsel our clients to do is have this be a written plan that is practical and helpful, that will establish what you need to do if you are going through a cyber incident. And it covers everything from who are going to be the members of your incident response team. For very small companies, that may be the only people there. For larger companies, you want representatives from the different groups within an organization. And it's not just the technical folks, which is kind of the default that a lot of people think. Well, if we have an incident, I'm going to go to my IT staff. You don't think through things like, what if our payroll systems are down and now we have to make payroll, but we can't access that. So you need someone from HR on your team. You need someone from communications on your team, from legal, and so forth. And so thinking through who are going to be the members of your team, and then identifying in that plan who the third parties that you may need to support you are. Who's your incident response forensic vendor? Who's your law firm you're going to go with? If you need an external PR firm, who is that? So that you're not trying to come up with those answers on the fly, which can take time. And during the course, especially in a ransomware incident, I mean, time is your enemy, right? I mean, you want to be moving as quickly and efficiently as possible. And then we counsel things alongside that planning, like negotiating the engagements with those third parties. So you already have a contract in place so that you can pull the trigger very quickly to get them in and get them working, to know who those contacts are so they know they're familiar with your system, they know they've worked with you before. And then, one, developing that plan, but then two, testing that plan. And what we talk to our clients about a lot is at least annually doing what's called a tabletop exercise, where we, or I know Kroll does a lot of this too, will come in and we will simulate a data incident, whether it be a ransomware attack, a business email compromise, a wire fraud case. We'll walk through the steps and simulate what happens, and then leave it up to what should be your incident response team that's identified in your incident response plan to work through, here's what so-and-so would be doing, here's what we would expect this person to do. And you walk through that, you learn what you did well, what you didn't do well, and then you take that knowledge and beef that up into your plan to make it better, and then rinse and repeat going forward.
And I tell you, I'm sure Andy has the same thing. If you're federally regulated industry like we are, you're required to have those incident response tabletop exercises, right? Right. And I'll tell you this, again, this is my world, this is what I do. Every single year when we do that exercise, we learn something. Every single year we learn something new that we hadn't thought of. And it comes up because, again, the scenarios change. So as they evolve each year, that's part of the benefit of doing it every single year and having somebody from the outside do it. It's not you thinking about what you would do and you feel really good and cozy inside. Having a third party do it. So I think I really value you guys and the responses here today. I think I concur with everything. I think having a plan before it happens is the most important thing, right? We do this in our life. We do this we teach our children how to do fire drills and tornado drills, and we walk through, what I would do if then scenarios. And it's very important to have a plan in place so that when it happens, it's not a knee jerk and you're not running with your hair on, because a lot of times that's when a lot of mistakes are happening. Mm-hmm. We had a question here, and we've got a few minutes here for a couple questions here at the end. Here from our Hendersonville office in Tennessee, they wanted to know if a password manager is helpful at all in enhancing cybersecurity. And I guess it's a timely question since one of the top password managers just experienced another compromise themselves. So I guess I'll throw it to our technical guy on the staff here for a second, Michael, and I kind of lobbed that up for you. There's not a single technology that's going to solve it all. But that said, the premise of password managers and not writing down passwords, and I still know people and family members that have what's my password, and they pull out a little book and they flip through the pages, and right?
Exactly.
So tell us, to answer this question, password manager helpful?
Password managers can be helpful, but as you mentioned, there's really no silver bullet to kind of help manage passwords and keep them secure. Obviously, if you use a password management system of any kind, especially if it's cloud-based, that's kind of where a lot of them go, because they're low cost, or in some cases they might be free. You need to ask yourself the question, what are the security controls that I have to keep my password safe? If there's no security controls from that specific vendor, or they're lacking, may not be the best option to use.
And when you say security controls, you mean, what did I have to do to get into it, right? Did I just have to log in with one password, then you had access to 80 passwords, or did it, when I tried to log into that vault that contains all my passwords, did it ask me for multi-factor, for example?
Exactly, and some of those vendors don't even offer some of those controls. Especially if it's free or almost close to free, they may not even have MFA as an option, and you should definitely stay away from those.
I would also add to that, I'd be skeptical of some of the smaller vendors in the app stores that you just don't know where you're giving those.
Yeah, or where your data is going once you enter that information.
Yeah, we've all learned that lesson, I'm sure, many times in life. If it's free, there's a cost, right? Nothing is really ever free.
It's too good to be true.
Law enforcement, you have a response on that, Jeremy, from a password manager? You guys...
I think what you said before is what happens if they get exploited.
Right.
And we've all seen that. There's definitely some well-known cloud vulnerabilities, so you bring up a good point. Totally different topic, but I did want to talk about smishing. So, we are seeing not only the phishing emails, but especially here around the holidays, you get that weird text that says there's a FedEx shipment at your door. how many of us are buying things, right, that are being shipped. So, do not click on those links either unless you absolutely know, and preferably have verified through an out-of-band way. So maybe call FedEx, hey, is this really my package? So,
Or the person you bought it from. If it's an Amazon, log into
exactly.
Amazon, right? Don't just
yeah,
click on the link.
exactly. So sorry about that, but I did forget to
that's a
mention
great
that.
public
We're
service.
just seeing more and more and more people fall for the smishing texts as well.
One of the things I would say that about these password managers that is a plus and a benefit, and that is it's really, really hard for us these days to come up with new passwords, come up with complex passwords, and a lot of these new tools offer the ability to just create one for you and save it. So you never even really know your password. It's inside that. I would just say if you're going to consider something like that, make sure it's multi-platform. It's something we always have our phones in our hands, so make sure that you can get to it through your phone, through your browser, through your iPad. That would be my recommendation. But it looks like we're at time. I want to say thank you to our panelist members. I really appreciate this. I think the biggest thing that we can do is education, learning, hearing from the experts. What I would say is if you're watching with us today, you're listening in, and there was a question you had and it didn't necessarily get answered, again, we're available. See your FA, see your Pinnacle person. They'll set up a call. I'm happy to jump on a call with you. I'm happy to loop one of these guys in and conference them in, and we can address and help you, because I think hopefully you've seen here today, this is something we're passionate about, is educating, and the more we can inform people, the better off we are. And maybe if we do nothing but keep one person from having to pay that ransomware today, then
Exactly.
I think we've done our job, and it's been well worth this time. So thank you again. I know that Pinnacle really focuses on giving distinct service and effective advice, and hopefully that's what you've taken away here today is you've got some effective advice to go out and tackle this threat landscape, and we appreciate you watching in with us.